Just hitting the. And we're live here on the Double A team. Ken Fang with you. And my regular co host, Stephen Negishi, cannot join us tonight. But instead, we have, as you can see there on the screen to your right there, we have NBC Olympics swimming analyst Rowdy Gaines, who's going to be joining us for a half hour tonight. We appreciate him joining us. I know he's getting ready and doing a lot of cramming for Paris, which will be coming up later in the month. And we'll talk to him about that and also a couple of other things that I have as well. Rowdy, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Ken. And as I said before we popped on, I'm a big fan of yours and awful announcing and just everything you guys do. And you personally have really kind of helped promote swimming, which is a big A plus in my book. So thank you.
Well, I go back to 1972 and watching Mark Spitz winning his 7 gold medals in Munich, West Germany at the time, and then 76, and when the East Germans seemed to be, we all thought there was something going on with them, and then going all the way through. So big Olympic fan, and also even going to the World Championships too. So, and like I said, we have 30 minutes. I'll do my best to cram everything in, but
no problem. No problem. I think people, I'll go as long as you want, but I think people will be bored by me after 30 minutes. Trust
no,
me.
you're making a lot of things to talk about. So, but first off, Rowdy, let's talk about the just completed U.S. Olympic swimming trials. Really, I mean, it looks like a very strong team. Of course, the USA and Australia they're going to have this big rivalry again. They had it in 2000. It seemed to go away when the Australians seemed to go off a little bit. I mean, they seemed to they didn't have as strong teams as recently, but then the World Championships. They won more gold medals than the United States. We'll go over that in a few minutes. But this team for the United States looks very, very strong. You got Caleb Dressel, Katie Ledecky, Kate Douglas. You've got all these people, the veterans that are coming back, the new ones coming in as well. How do you think they're going to be able to? Let's talk a little bit about the trials. How do you think the United States did, and how do you think this team is formulating? Looks to you?
Well, Ken, I think, overall, the United States will certainly be the best country in the world. Again, they've been the best country for 64 years, and that's not going to change in Paris based on the system that the U.S. has always measured by, which is like a three-pronged system, not to bore the audience, but we measure it by total medals, gold medals, and a point system, which actually the World Aquatics measures it by. So at the World Championships last summer, they gave the winning country, the United States, the gold medal or the highest rated country based on a point system. But Australia, to be fair, only measures one way, and that's gold medals. And they did win the most gold medals last summer. So going in, I think the team, getting back to your specific question, I think they are strong overall. The women probably a little bit more so than men from a depth perspective. But you're right, the superstars come back. That helps a lot. Not so much in the pool, which it does, obviously, but it's out of the pool. And I think the United States has always had this camaraderie because we're kind of used to it because of the college system.
Yes.
And no other country has that. And the college system, as you well know, in any sport is really about team. Even though swimming is an individual sport, it's very much about team and teamwork. And so they're kind of used to that format. And I think that's one reason why the U.S. has always come together at the Olympics. But they've got a great mix of veterans and rookies again this year, just like they have, every Olympics.
Also, too, and I watched a bit of this is how crazy I am, Rowdy. I will watch. I have my ways of watching the Australian Olympic trials. I watched a lot of that, and there was this documentary that they showed, which you were in, by the way.
You saw that?
I did. This is how I told you I'm crazy. This is I when it comes into Olympic time, I will do my homework on my own to watch. I'll watch Canadians. I'll watch the track. I'll watch the Jamaicans. This is how crazy I am. So
I tried watching that documentary now for a month. I can't get a hold of it. So I'm impressed that you got to see it.
Well, you were in it. You were prominently featured in it. And you had mentioned that you felt at that time, before the trials came about, before both trials, that you felt the Australians would at least have a good chance of taking more medals than the Americans in Paris. Do you still feel that way?
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's right there on paper. I deal with black and white, Ken. I don't deal with possibilities and judging and personal opinion. I do deal with that, but when it comes to straight on, very black and white, it's right there on paper. Our sport is not judged. Our sport is all about the clock, and when you base things on the clock, they have the upper hand on gold medals. Total medals is not close. The U.S. will kill them
Right.
in total medals. But
Mhm.
gold medals, their measuring stick, it's going to be very tight. Right now, based on world rankings, they win 8 gold medals and the U.S. wins 8 gold medals. So
Mhm.
it's that's based on the times leading up to Paris. Now, again, that could change either way. But you have to go on paper from last summer. They're the kings when it comes to gold medals again. And so they should be favored again to win the most gold medals.
We're speaking with Rowdy Gaines, NBC Sports swimming analyst. He's been doing this, I believe, 1992 is when you started, Rowdy.
I
If
did.
oh wow, so you were Charlie Jones and Summer Sanders back then, and then been with Dan Hicks since 1996, if I'm not mistaken. So,
That's right.
um,
That's right. I
yeah.
started off, Ken, on the triple cast. I
Oh
don't know if you
yes,
remember that.
yes, I
Yeah.
do. Yes,
I,
yes, we
I
all.
did I did the triple cast in '92 for NBC. It was kind of ahead of its time. It's sort of
Yes, it was.
what Peacock kind of exists for now. I mean, it was really cool, and red, white, and blue channel.
Yes.
But I started off with a triple cast, which really helped me learn the ropes of.
Mhm.
Not that I'm a professional broadcaster because I'm far from it, but to learn the ropes to be able to call races. And then I started over the air with Dan in 1996. So this will be our 8th games together.
And it's been a fantastic team, and we'll go over that in a second. But continuing on for Paris, at least, you talked about the United States team. Of course, as I mentioned, some of the veterans coming back. Some Lily King, who had that great wedding proposal at the side of the pool, which surprised everybody. But aside from that, I mean, you've got these veterans like Simone Manuel coming back, but you also have new people coming in as well. So how's that mixture going to work? It's always worked before. How's it going to work in Paris this year?
So here's the deal. So what happens is you have, and I'm not sure, I think about 30% of the team are rookies. So they are going to be going in wide eyed. They're Olympian, first time Olympians. Really, that's where it ends for so many is at the Olympic trials, just making the team. And that's true for even veterans. But once the veterans make the team that have made an Olympic Games before, it's easier for them to kind of reset their goals. So it's going to be up to the veterans to get together with the rookies and say, hey, you're a third of this team. You need to think the trials does not exist anymore. You're Olympians, you're representing the United States, and you need to take what you did at the trials to a different level. You need to take an Aaron Shackle, for example, 18, 19-year-old kid who won the 400 freestyle. Sister made the team for both at 17, both first time rookies,
Amazing.
and they could easily fold at the Olympics. I'm not saying they are, but it's happened to rookies before where they make the team and that was it. That's all they really wanted. Now that's up to the veterans like Ryan Murphy, like Lily King, like Katie, Caleb, and so many others to be able to say, dude, that's not what it's all about. It's about the Olympics. We can talk all we want to about how trials and how stressful it is, but now it's time to reset and get ready. So that's what those veterans are able to do. I think with these rookies, and it's really important they come together to be able to walk on the deck and not be intimidated by the rest of the world because it is intimidating. Let me tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that the World Championships is one animal, but then Olympics is just a completely different animal.
Yeah.
We all love the World Championships. The Worlds is again best on best, but this is something where everybody is really paying attention, and everything is just gets magnified. I mean, even a look like when Michael Phelps is giving a sneer towards Chad Leclos in Rio, or Lily King wagging her finger against the Russian swimmer, everything gets magnified.
It is. It really is. I mean, the Olympics is the pinnacle of success for our sport. We don't have a Super Bowl or World Series. We have the Olympics. I mean, you can think of World Championships as the in football terms as the NFC championship, or the AFC title. But if you don't win the Super Bowl, nobody's going to remember who was the runner up in the Super Bowl, who lost the Super Bowls. They're going to remember who the winner was. And unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way, but it is. That's what happens in our sport. Everybody remembers the Olympics. Nobody's going to remember how many world championships you won, and it's unfair. But that's the cards we've been dealt, and that's why the Olympics is every 4 years. It's not every year. Imagine playing a Super Bowl every 4 years, Ken. That's how big the Olympics is. It's sort of like the World Cup in soccer. That's what I can kind of compare it to, on that kind of level.
One thing that's amazing too, Rowdy, and I don't want to say back in your day, but back in your day, swimming two Olympics was practically rare. Um, it was like you had your shot in 76 or 80. You were one of the rare ones because you decided to come back in 84 after that boycott. We'll talk about that too. I'm still angry about the 1980 boycott. I'm still angry about that. But now you see like Michael Phelps swimming in four Olympics, Katie Ledecky in her fourth Olympics. What is it now about conditioning that allows athletes to swim for such a long time, where we used to be you swam one period, one Olympic cycle, or even rarely two, and that was it?
Well, buddy, I think the big thing is not so much about conditioning. I think the key aspect and the change in the sport, and the reason why they have been able to do that for so many quads, is the fact that money has changed the sport. When I
Mm.
swam, there was no money, zero. When I won 3 gold medals in 1984, I got nothing, zero. And I didn't expect anything. There was no expectations either. So for me, I swam for the love of it. Now, did I think that there were possibilities for me after the Olympics? Yeah, but I never swam thinking I was going to win money. So today, you can actually make a living swimming. Most swimmers, I'll tell you, don't make much money. The average person training for the Olympic trials that's post grad makes about $25,000 a year. So nobody's getting rich doing it, except for those that are really good, like those swimmers we've been talking about. So I think that's the biggest change in our sport compared to when I swam, is the fact that you can actually earn a living swimming. And that's what keeps these athletes involved in the sport for so long.
Mhm. And you talk about like Katie Ledecky continuing that great consistency. Of course, she has Ariane Titmus of Australian, and if you have not seen Ariane Titmus swim, you really have to, because back in Tokyo, her coach went absolutely insane. He still does. He still goes insane. But you look for the videos of YouTube of Ariane Titmus coach, and then you'll notice exactly what I'm talking about. But
Oh yeah.
um, you know, everyone thinks, okay, well, Katie can still do this, but Ariane Titmus has something on her. I think is it in the 400? I believe that they swim the event together. That's the one event
Yes.
that kind of Katie's kryptonite for the last couple of cycles, but she does everything elsewhere. But is she a favorite to win again in this Olympics?
Yeah, yeah, she is. She's got the world record. She's about 3 seconds ahead of Katie right now. I think where the race really is going to get interesting, Ken, and people really have to tune into the eighth night of swimming, because it's going to be the greatest night of swimming, I think, at these Olympic Games. If you don't tune at all, you tune in the eighth night, because you've got the women's 800 freestyle, an event that Katie has, going for four in a row. And Titmus will be in that. And right now, like a couple of tenths of a second separates them. Uh, but yeah, so that's going to be the big one. I think Titmus is going to be the favorite in the 400, and then you've got the hunter fly with Kayla Dressel, and then you've got the women's 200 IM. And you mentioned Kate Douglas. You could have three swimmers having won gold medals by that time. Kate in the 200 breast, potentially. Titmus, I mean, not Titmus, Kaylee McCune in the backstrokes, and then Summer McIntosh, who is a little girl from
Yes,
Canada,
Canada. Yeah.
17 years old. I can call her girl because she is a girl. 17-year-old girl who might just be world champion in the 400 IM, or excuse me, Olympic gold medalist in 400 IM. So that's going to be a really cool night of swimming.
Mm. And of course, that's almost to the end of the cycle
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
for that period of time. Also, this just came to me, but the Olympics in Los Angeles is going to switch. Usually, the
No,
swimming goes first, and then track and field goes second, but they're going to switch
crazy.
that. What do you think about that?
Crazy. I love it. Are you
Yeah.
kidding me? We've never had that. I mean, I've never seen that before ever. Now, if you go back to pre 1960s swimming, I don't know when swimming happened, but for the last 60 plus years, it's always been first. But to have the swimming be the last half of the Olympic Games and track be the first half, it's going to be really fascinating to watch. And we're going to have a swim meet in a football stadium again, just like
Yes.
Lucas Oil, but this time SoFi.
How was that atmosphere like? I mean, the Olympic trials have been in
Oh,
Omaha seemingly forever. They went to Lucas Oil. You had a bigger crowd, allowed more people in. But what was that atmosphere like?
it was insane. I've never seen anything like that in my sport, Ken. I've been to every trial since 1980. I think this was number 12, and been to every Olympics since 1984. And I can tell you, nothing unlike this in our sport ever I've seen. It was really magical. And when you had 25,000 people in that stadium every single night, for us, 25,000 people doesn't sound like a big number to many, but for us, it was breaking records every night. And I think it got people to tune in and see some really cool events in the sport. And it really kept the sport in a high profile. And I really commend the folks at USA Swimming and Indiana Sports Corp for, taking a risk, because that's a big risk, man. Big bucks. It was not cheap to do that. But at the end, I think it was really good for the sport. Not so much presently, but what it's going to help do for the sport in the future.
I have to say, it really looked good on television. And sometimes when you have a situation, swimming pools, and sometimes they don't come across
Empty.
well. This really came across.
Yeah, I had my trials in Indy in '84, and I think 15 people showed up, and half of them were my family. So it's come a long way in 40 years for sure.
It certainly has. Rowdy, one of the things that I think endears you to a lot of people is that when you get and I joked about this on Twitter or X, when your voice goes up, I know that something big is happening. Whether you say, "Did you see the turn, Dan?" which is one of my favorite moments, or just when you just know that. And I know that you have your own stopwatch as well, so you're timing the swimmers as well, so you know if they're ahead of world record pace. What is it about when you go up like that? What your enthusiasm really comes across, and I think that really endears you to the fans when we know that something big is coming up.
Well, let me say this, Ken. I don't know half as much about swimming as so many other of these great Olympians, these post Olympians now that want to get into broadcasting, and many will be very good. Cody Miller is very smart. Michael Phelps, Elizabeth Beisel, all
Rhode Island, by
mates
the
of
way.
mine in the booth. They're great. But nobody loves swimming more than I do.
Mm,
I'll challenge anybody out there to have the passion that I do for our sport, because the sport changed my life, buddy. It literally changed my life. I didn't start swimming until I was 17. I was going down a path that I probably wasn't too proud of at the time. It wasn't anything real dark, but I was up to no good.
mhm.
And once I started swimming, it changed the direction of my life. So what you see and what you hear from me um, couldn't be more genuine. I love swimming. I love to talk about swimming. I bore people to death about it if I can, and I think that's one reason why I get hired. Every 4 years is because I think I translate that to the average person to show them how much I care about our sport.
Mm, because it's like whether it is the 2008 4 by one relay between the United States and France, or Michael Phelps going in Rio for his last race, or even the 2020 meet, which in Tokyo, which was a totally different meet without anybody there, but you still managed to convey that excitement. it's there, and I think that if that's what fans want to get into. I mean, that's why fans like Gus Johnson or screaming Chad Chamella for the cross country skiing every 4 years during the Winter Olympics. But it really comes across. And I really appreciate it. I've said this before. I may have the sound down, but I can hear your voice come through. That's when I know when to turn the sound up, and that's then I know something big is happening. But
Yeah.
what are some of the moments that you remember? I mean, aside from the ones that I think about, but what are some of the moments that you think about every 4 years that you think about that some of the better moments that you've had a chance to be in the broadcast booth for?
Well, for me, you mean as far as the races I've called before?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the first one, the 400 free relay. If I think most people in your audience and audiences out there know how big of a race that was, because they did an hour and a half documentary on a 3-minute race. That's how big it was. And the documentary is called The Greatest Race. So
Yes.
that kind of tells you everything about that single race and how important it was. It was Michael's second race. So his road to 8 gold medals. There was a journeyman sprinter named Jason Lezak who anchored in the fastest split in history, still to this day, 16 years later, the
Hmm.
fastest split ever. So there's so many different dynamics to that. I think Michael's 100 fly in that would be up there on my Mount Rushmore too, when he won by 1/100th of a second. Again, to keep that quest going for 8 gold medals. That was his seventh one. So I think Katie's first one in 2012 was pretty special. She's 15 years old.
Yeah.
There was a British girl that was the favorite, and and she beat her in her home country, and that was really cool. But I go back, Ken. I go back to Summer Sanders in '92,
Yes.
Jeff Rouse, who won the 100 back in '96. uh, in 2000. Again, these are Americans, but 2000, the Aussies winning that 400 free relay was unbelievable. It was at the expense of the United States, but that was another one that we were talking about earlier. I mean, I can go on and on. That the 800 free relay for the United States in Athens was awesome. Um, in 2016, for me, Lily King winning that 100 breaststroke is right up
Mhm.
there. It
Yes.
was just unbelievable. I always love watching her swim. So many. Caleb Dressel in the 100 freestyle, Nathan Adrian in the 100 freestyle, an event that I won in 1984, and it kind of carries on that great tradition of American excellence in the 100 free. It's been a long time. So when Nathan won in 2012, had went back all the way back to '88 before the United States won, and kind of Caleb carried that tradition in 20. So again, I'm waxing on poetically about all these races. There's so many that come to my mind, but those kind of flash to the top of my head right away.
Uh, Quickly going back to Paris, how do you think the men's 4x100 relay could go? I mean, I know that's always the big rivalry between United States and Australia, but there's always other countries that can be in there too. How do you see that one going?
Right now, on paper, again, that's how you kind of measure it. Best times this year add up to the U.S. winning by about a second. Now, that can change in a heartbeat. That means all four of those guys have to come together.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing with any other country. All four have to come together. And if just one falters, then, you're up the creek without a paddle. So on paper, the U.S. seems to be the favorite in that, the 400 medley relay. Um, and women's 400 medley relay is the favorite, and perhaps the mixed medley relay, although that's another one that China will be really good in. So who knows? Those are the relays the U.S. is favored in. The 400 free relay is the very first night, so it should be a lot of fun. First night or second night? Maybe it's the second night. I can't remember. I lose track.
Right. It's going to be, I mean, the swimming is always fun, especially the first part, the first 8 or 9 days of the
Yeah.
16 days of competition. Always fun. One thing also too, we mentioned China, which has been like the elephant in the room, the dark elephant in the room.
Yeah.
They've had issues with doping. There was, of course, the story about swimmers that were tested for positive, but then they didn't tell UADA, the anti-doping agency. What is I still don't understand why China is allowed to compete. I say this as an Asian. I say this because I'm Taiwanese, but I still don't get it. What is your reaction when you hear stuff like that, especially when you want to keep an even playing field, especially in the sport that we've heard so much about, is going back to 1976 with the East Germans?
Well, and that's one reason why it's disheartening, Ken, is because it does take me back, to the early '80s, and late '70s when I was a swimmer, and I saw firsthand, especially from our women's side, that the East Germans cheated. We knew back then. Shirley Babashoff called it out
Yes.
in 1976. They called her Surly Shirley. The media was just hounded her and called her a poor sport, and it ends up she was right. And it was pretty obvious that they were cheating. Um, which you just think in present day, how can that still happen? I think Katie Ledecky said it best in an interview a couple weeks ago, where she just said, I think the trust is at an all time low in the system. I I I think that the only thing that can really hurt our sport, I just think swimming, right? I mean, it's probably true in other sports too. Track and field comes to mind, cycling, etc. But the only thing that can really hurt our sport is performance enhancing drugs, when it's known that there are people cheating, because I think the average American public holds the Olympic athlete at a much higher standard than a professional athlete like a football player or something like that. Baseball, it's not a big deal when a football player gets caught. It's a big deal for an Olympian. So I think, in the long run, I hope and pray that, um, the system comes out ahead of the athletes. I have no idea about China. If I knew, I would tell you, dude. I have
Mhm,
no idea. I'm like you. It's only what I read. And from
mhm.
what I read, it's disheartening. It really is. I can't hide that disappointment. But, it's what I tell the athletes, man. You unfortunately, right now, this very minute, you can't do anything about it. You got to go out and do which is the biggest cliche in the world. Is just go out, do the best you can,
Mhm.
and, let the system hopefully take care of itself by catching those. But it is disheartening, no doubt about it.
Absolutely, especially in a system that's supposed to catch them and then
Right.
doesn't
That's supposed to
physically.
stick up for the athlete, a system that is
Exactly.
supposed to protect the athlete. That's
Mhm.
what it's put in place for. And that's what is, so depressing about it.
Absolutely, 100%. Speaking with Rowdy Gaines of NBC, going to be in Paris coming up, and I know he and Dan Hicks are going to do a fantastic job. I think one of the longest running pairs announcing duos in an Olympics. I think, and as you mentioned, going back to 1996. One thing in the brief time that we have, I have to talk about 1984. And if you want to take a look at Rowdy, I know Rowdy is known more now to the younger generation as an analyst. But if you go back to his YouTube videos, and they are there, ABC broadcast the 1984 Olympics. Jim Lampley called it when Mark Spitz was the analyst, by the way.
That's right.
Um, yes, and he won. Going into the 1984 games, of course, like I mentioned, the night you were an odds-on favorite to win golds in the 1980 Olympics. Jimmy Carter decided to pull the athletes out due to Afghanistan. I'm still angry about it to this day, but I'm not going to get into it. But you went into the 80, decided to come back for the 84 games. At that time, as I mentioned, very rare for an Olympic swimmer to go in for two cycles. First of all, I know that you weren't talk about what you weren't in a great headspace going into the games. I know mental health is very important to you. So, what was it like going into those games, and what was it like knowing that thinking that can I do this? Can I actually do this against these type of athletes? What was the mindset going in?
Well, Ken, I think for me, going back to the boycott, I was so distraught because of the fact that it did not work.
Hmm.
In hindsight's a beautiful thing, I know, but it just amazed me that somebody in our government didn't realize that the boycott would not be successful. They did it for two reasons: one, to get the Russians out of Afghanistan, a country that they had invaded, or two, to get the Olympics out of Moscow. Well, neither one of those happened, and neither one of those were ever going to happen. In fact, the Russians loved it that we didn't come, because they won more medals and they were able to use that, as power. Um, so hanging on to 84 was very difficult. There were 363 athletes, buddy, that that made the 1980 team that did not make it in 1976 and did not make it in 1984. That was their lone Olympic team. So for me, those are the real heroes, and those were the swimmers or athletes, not just swimmers. Those were the athletes that I kind of swam for in 1984 because they deserved to be a true Olympian, and they were pretty much ghost Olympians. As again and again, I'll tell you, there was no money. I worked as a night clerk. I had the 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. shift for about a year and a half at the local Hyatt in Austin, Texas, to make money. And it was a long journey, but for me, it was worth it because my dream was to be able to represent my country at an Olympics, and that dream did come true for me. So I feel very fortunate and very blessed that I had that opportunity. I know that sounds like a big cornball answer, but it is true. It's the honest to God truth.
And when you hear about mental health, and Simone Manuel had talked about mental health as
Yeah.
well, I know you're a big advocate for it. What does that ring to you when you hear someone saying, "I'm not in a good headspace. I need to clear my head. I need to get away from the sport for a while." And she did that, and now it looks like she's in a better space now. But when you think about mental health, what does that mean to you?
Well, it means a lot to me because I deal with it myself, buddy. I have the same thing that happens to me today. So I won't get into details, but I struggle with it too, and so I'm very open about it. I never had that. We never had that, did we? I mean, 40 years ago, it was like, get
Yeah,
your butt back in the pool. There's
yeah.
no mental health day. So it was a long time coming. There are a lot of people out there that are on the forefront of that. I think Kevin Love is one of them. I think he was one of the original guys that talked about it. His mental health is so important. You got to remember, and this is really important. In our sport, it's every 4 years, right? And this sport can chew you up and spit you out in a big way, man. And you got to these kids. I call them kids because what they are to me. But these kids are training 4, 5, 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. They're swimming. Well, Katie swims 60, 70 miles a week.
Mm,
And if you do the math, that's a lot of miles. She has swum around the world a couple of times, figuratively, not literally, but figuratively. So it's not for the faint of heart, and that's just the physical part. But the mental and emotional toll it can take on you is pretty hard. Now, there is mental health for, I'm just taking my sport, but there's mental health that needs to be addressed for everything that has nothing to do with sports. And I'm really glad that we're dealing with it openly and honestly now. And I think it can only help those people that realize they do need help by looking at a Simone Manual or looking at a Simone Biles, for example, and
mm,
say, "Oh my gosh, these are the highest profile possible athletes, and they're dealing with emotional problems just like I am. And I don't have anything to do with sports. So if they are dealing with it and they're trying to overcome it, then I can get help too." And I think that's really helped the average person that has nothing to do with training for the Olympics.
absolutely, and very well stated. I have we're going to end it very shortly, but I have one other thing to say.
No problem.
Another
No
question.
problem, buddy.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you coming on with us. Especially, I know you're busy and you got
No
homework
problem.
to do. One other big thing, and you may not know this, but Rowdy Gaines is a big Auburn fan, an Auburn alum. If you go to YouTube and also the other big, what does the name Chris Davis mean to you?
Oh my gosh. Dude, so you know the story behind that, right?
Yes, I do.
So my wife was sitting on the couch, right? And this field goal, Chris Davis, one of the greatest college football players in history. I think people know that story, Auburn, Alabama, the Iron Bowl and everything. Last, field goal to win the game for Bama, and the Chris Davis returns it. But I had no idea my wife was filming me. She's got the phone like this, and just sitting back, and we're watching it, and yeah, and I just go crazy, and I look, it's funny because my wife and I will watch it every once in a while. I'll show it to a friend that says, "Oh, I've never seen that," and we'll show. And I look at myself, I go, "Oh my gosh, what an idiot! Look how foolish this guy looks. I even laugh at myself. I go, oh my gosh, look at that idiot. I'm going, wait a second, that's me. I'm the idiot. So
If you
it was crazy. You know, we've always been a little bit of a little brother, a little sister to Alabama in many ways,
yes.
and especially in football. So to have that great moment, we deserve it. We don't get many of them, so we deserve that for sure.
And if you haven't seen it, yes, Rowdy is
All you
jumping
have
up.
to do is all you have to do is Google Rowdy Gaines Iron Bowl, and it'll pop up.
Yeah. I think a lot of people who were Alabama haters at the time were with you jumping up and down. So I think that first of all, one of the greatest moments in college football
It
history,
was.
called
It
by one of
was.
called by one of the greatest announcers of all time, in
It
Vern
was. Vern
Lundquist,
Lundquist. Yep.
and then running, and then just seeing the whole thing. I think it was on a perfect night too. It was a Saturday night.
It
Everybody
was.
was coming home or just ready to go out, and they said, "Let me just see what's going on in the Iron Bowl," and
Well,
then everything just
and remember the background to it. Remember, he called timeout when the clock had expired, so he went to
yes,
a replay, and they
yes.
put 1 second back on the clock. Otherwise, it would have gone into overtime. But he threw the he had him, or they looked at the play and said, okay, he did step out with 1 second left, and then he put a bunch of slow tackles out there to
Mhm.
block. It's just the back. It's sort of like the backstory of the 400 free relay for guys. You know, if you just know the backstory, that's what made it so dramatic. And then he's back there at the very 110-yard mark. You know, he's almost stepping on the line when he catches the ball. So it was, and I'll never forget. Oh my gosh, God rest his soul. He passed away. But the Auburn radio guy, he
Yes.
said, "You're not gonna keep him off the field tonight." And the next thing you know, there were 100,000 people on the field. So it's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
and that was the second hit prayer Jordan Hare, because like a couple of weeks before
Yeah,
there
it
was
was at
that Mary
Georgia.
Network. Yeah, so
Yep.
that was the second. That was
Miracle of Jordan Hare. Yep. Yep.
yeah, yep. So that was the prayer Jordan Hare too, and which will be ever be
Prayer
remembered.
Jordan Hare. That's what it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I had to get that in there because I have all these things. I knew that when we got together, I have so many things to ask you, Rowdy. So I'm finally glad that we got together. Um, but Rowdy, so Paris coming up. Going to be doing that for NBC. Your voice is going to be heard during the afternoon finals, and I guess during prime time as well when they do the replay. Um, Looking forward to it. And are there
Right.
any? Will you have any chance to go and do some sightseeing in Paris?
Not the first 10 days, that's for sure. So the schedule is, I'm going to go to Croatia first
Oh
on
wow!
the 17th, to spend a little while with the Olympic team. Our swim team is at training camp there. And
Oh
every Olympic cycle, Dan and I get to go to the training camp and kind of hang out with the athletes, just kind of immerse ourselves with them. They're really very kind and letting us, eat meals with them, go to their practice, just to get to know them. Because once we get to Paris, they're at the village, we're at a hotel, we don't really get to see them at all. So it's
mhm.
our chance to get to know the kids a little bit, and then I'll be there 4 or 5 days, and then my wife's going to come with me, so we will head to Paris, and then that first 10 days during the swimming, no, and I don't. It's pool hotel. I'll be at the pool, 15, 16 hours a day at least. So, but yeah, after swimming's over with, we'll get to explore and do a few fun things. I also do the open water, so that'll be coming up
Right.
later on in the week.
Right. And I was going to ask about this, but we've run out of time. But we'll talk about. But anyway, maybe after the Olympics, we'll have you back on and have you sum up the.
Anytime, buddy. I'm a fan, my man. So anytime you want anything, you let me know.
I appreciate it. Rowdy Gaines, NBC Sports swimming analyst, goes back to 1992. Every 4 years, and you never know what great moment and great viral moment he's had. Whether it's, like I said, have you seen the turn Dan, or he's tightening up, or something like that. Um,
No doubt
I'll
he's tightening up.
Yes, exactly. He's tightening up. So absolutely. So Rowdy, thank you for joining us, and thank you for taking some time out for us on the Double A team tonight.
Take care, buddy.
All right, the stream.